I can post them there for us. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Might just give it another minute as people filter in, and then I'll get started. Okay, I think we're good to go. Okay, so welcome everyone to episode 10 of our relocalization webinar series. I am Liv Langell, the Center for Local Prosperity's program manager and your moderator today for this episode on the transition town movement and what it means for relocalization and local prosperity, especially here in Atlantic Canada. So we have three amazing panelists today. We have Bill Sharp, David Wimberly, and Bob Cervelli, and I'll introduce them in a moment. But just a brief introduction to the Center for Local Prosperity for anyone who might be new. We're a charity based in Nova Scotia, but we do work throughout Atlantic Canada. Our focus is on economic relocalization with an aim to build resilience, agency, and empowerment within rural communities and their place-based economies across the region for greater well-being and prosperity for all. We do this work through convenings like conferences and this summer a festival, excitingly. Film screenings, retreats. We also do educational projects like this webinar and other projects related to community wealth building, including a current local procurement project in Cape Breton. So you can find more information about the Center for Local Prosperity at centerforlocalprosperity.ca. We actually have most of our staff team here today. Nike, our communications coordinator, Andy, our executive director, Justin, our new director of policy, and Bob, our senior advisor, who is also one of our panelists today. A little bit of housekeeping. We are recording. If everybody could mute themselves except for the panelists, that would be excellent. This is a brief 1 hour lunch and learn style webinar. So we'll start with some introductions and brief presentations from each panelist to let them describe what they do in a bit more detail. Then we'll move into a interview style discussion followed by an interactive Q&A. If anyone has questions as we go along, please do write them in the chat and we will monitor it and get back to them during the Q&A period closer to the end. And Nike will monitor the chat for us. I do want to offer a land acknowledgement. So most of us here today are located in various corners of Mi'kma'ki, which is made up of what is commonly referred to as Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, the island of Newfoundland, and parts of New Brunswick and Quebec. The land we live on has been inhabited for Mi'kmaq people for millennia and African Nova Scotians for more than 400 years before it was colonized by Europeans. And colonization is far from over. It is still happening today. So land acknowledgements, we feel, is very much a first step. And you can read more about how to engage with reconciliation work by reading the 94 Calls to Action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. And now on to some introductions. So Bill, I'm going to start with you. Bill Sharp is joining us today from Central Pennsylvania. Bill first got involved with the transition movement in 2009 and is the founder and director of the Transition Center and Rural Resilient Hub. The Rural Resilient Hub assists small, distressed communities across the U.S. to develop self-reliant and sustainable local economies and strong communities with a high quality of life. So these are hopefully places that your children will want to stay and make their home. Bill, I will hand it over to you for a 4 or 5 minute introduction on your background and work.
Okay, thank you. So, greetings, everybody. I'm going to give you a brief overview of what I call transition evolution, where we've been and where we might go. Transition Towns was started by Rob Hopkins at Totnes, UK in 2006. Its objectives were to address climate change and petroleum depletion. Several other UK communities followed suit. A serious economic recession came with 2008. In late 2008, Rob published the Transition Handbook, bringing together what had been learned. Uh, with it, the global movement was started. Some 1,200 formal initiatives were formed in 60 countries. Transition US was formed in January 2009 and Transition Center in March of that year, and we became a statewide hub. Rob was a permaculture teacher and used a whole systems approach. He listed 12 steps in the transition process, leading to a comprehensive community plan. Totnes finished the first of these in 2010, Transition in Action. That was a 20-year plan. Transition State College, our home community formal initiative, was formed in 2010. Local environmental leaders chose the transition model because it was grassroots and comprehensive. We completed our local comprehensive plan in 2015, formed a networking program to help catalyze a rapid expansion in regional sustainability. I should note we drew heavily on David Orr's Oberlin, Ohio full spectrum model and Ralph Bersodi's school living. Things change. Leading the list of issues was that transition towns followed the rule of five. 1 in 5 organizations make it into its 5th year. Too few, we found, had the capacity to sustain themselves, let alone the capacity to create a visionary plan. Burnout took its toll. The Paris Agreement was signed in 2015, but little progress was made. We rethought our model. In 2019, we switched our model from sustainability, which is maintenance, to resilience, which is adaptation. We revised our plan into a resilient communities blueprint. Then came COVID. A group of us became together then, some transition veterans, others bringing a broader perspective. We focused on the bellwether example of the impact of globalization, declining and distressed rural communities. And, and that list continues to grow. 2025 brought a perfect storm of challenges, including dramatic global trade changes, geopolitical conflict, unconstrained climate change, and the AI explosion. A lot of good things have been done by transition towns and other sustainability efforts, education, projects, and community gatherings. We've learned a great deal in these 20 years. Transition Network International is seeking to move forward. Those of us who are certified trainers are prepared to offer a series of courses. Transition Center also offers a multi-tier of programs from forming a group to developing a comprehensive plan. I believe it is increasingly clear that communities must take greater command of their own future. Early transition towns pointed the way. As noted, scaling, and many seek this, is demanding. If you can't expect grants and outside expertise, then the resources must come from within your community. To that end, we, in ongoing consultation with people in a global network, are developing a model that focuses on coherent community, on an integral economy for it, and an educational program that provides it with the knowledge, skills, and institutional framework it needs. It's called New Community, New Economy. And a formal launch is scheduled for mid-year, and you are all welcome to join that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for that overview, Bill. Next, we have David Wimberly. So, David is a co founder and event and outreach coordinator of Transition St. Margaret's Bay, where he develops economic, energy, food, and ecological resilience on a community level. He also has been active for decades in waste and resource issues, particularly in compost zero waste strategies, a topic on which he hosted an Eastlink TV show for 3 years. David is also Canada's only master flute maker of modern instruments for classical and other music, a craft he's been dedicated to for 44 years. David, handing it over to you.
Thank you for having me. What really draws me to the transition movement is that it's based on permaculture, and that is taking living systems and applying this complexity of living systems with multiple ways that we look at it in multiple areas to our not just the house we live in, but our community. And the idea that if we try to change just our own little piece of land, it's a very lonely thing. And even if we do, we haven't really affected that much, although it's a wonderful thing to do. And if we try to change the entire world, well, it's like Sisyphus pushing the stone up the hill and then it's sliding down every night. It's very difficult to achieve. But if we work on a local basis of a community, it's kind of just right. It's that Goldilocks place. And we can make changes that really change our world. And um, transition has a big vision. And this is both a difficulty, but it's the genius of it as well. Because we're not trained to think in big visions anymore. We're in our society. We're mostly trained to look at little tiny compartments and think that we're really the big shot because we know a whole lot about some little tiny, tiny aspect. When we really don't know enough to keep a chicken, much less how to grow a tomato. Uh, so right now we are in the end stage of capitalism and the end stage of the kind of economies and the kinds of ecosystems that have supported humanity. It's been ecologically, it's been the Holocene has been a very, very stable situation, but it's in rapid collapse, faster collapse than ever in the history of the Earth, other than a meteorite striking us. And how do we build a resilience for our future? Well, we don't do it by a few little tweaks to our systems because we're just trying to, that just gets the system going a little longer. Now, a few tweaks can give us some resilience to get to the next stage, but we need to think big. What's really going to do it? And I think thinking big is thinking like an ecosystem. And that's what Transition Bay can help us do on a community basis. And we need to step beyond all the hierarchies of wealth and power that we see destroy not just our world and not just our economies, but our morals as well. Um, and it's shocking. We need to think like living systems, and we need to go back to the idea that everything around us is alive. So we have a living connection with our neighbors. We have a living connection with the forest and the trees, and even the earth that we walk on is full of life, and many people say it is alive itself in a certain way. But if we grant it this interconnectedness with us, that we're not separate from it, then we can start thinking big and we can come up with systems that actually are transformative in the fundamental way that we need to do. And that's what transition can help us to do. Now, it is difficult to do that, sure. And that's why, as Bill was showing so well, that a lot of places go into it with naivete and just burn out because it's so difficult. Um, Transition Bay St. Margaret's um, hasn't burned out, but we've just had a very small core group that keeps on doing things and doing things. And instead of forming a giant committees that all report to a central thing, which is great for some projects, we've just had a core group that keeps on putting on programs and planting seeds in our community. Now, one of the first seeds that took off was a local um, farmers market. It had been tried several times before, never worked. We tried it, well, it was just the right timing, and it took off immediately, pop, and went off on its own. Another group that we started actually was the Center for Local Prosperity, because that came about originally when I wanted to do a program on local economics. Bob Cervelli said, well, we've got some people there that want to do something similar and maybe more regionally than transition. And the Center for Local Prosperity grew out of that. Um, so we don't control it. Transition Bay doesn't control it other than Bob's influence, but it's how you can be successful. And people are drawn in our culture towards discrete projects that we can work on and maybe do something. But
David, I'll stop you there just for a second for your intro. Thank you so much for your overview. I'm gonna get into the interview section in a moment after Bob's introduction. So finally, we have the Center for Local Prosperity's own Bob Cervelli. He is a co-founder, longtime ED, and current senior advisor, and co-founder of Transition St. Margaret's Bay. Bob has been an active volunteer in community building for over 35 years and advises other rural maritime communities on the process of transition initiatives in order to draw out the skills, processes, and projects inherent in local cultures to build resilience and adaptability to global change. A particular area of Bob's interest is in rebuilding economic resilience at the local and regional levels. Could you give us a brief background and introduction, Bob?
Thank you so much, Liv. Yes, David and I, co-founders of Transition Bay St. Margaret's. At the time, 15 years ago, and by the way, Nike, thank you for posting our webpage, reverse history of all 15 years worth of events, workshops, films with discussions, all kinds of things that we did. It's all hinged around community resilience in one way or another. So scroll through that. It's quite a nice list. We're going to turn it into some sort of a movie reel, I think, at some point is part of the plan. So back 15 years ago, it was already apparent that the world was changing pretty dramatically in a lot of different ways based on economy, environment, energy, and even social equity. That is a lot of what started the transition movement out of tautness, as Bill alluded, with Rob Hopkins. So we looked into it. There was no transition initiatives in certainly in Atlantic Canada, and I think very few across Canada. So we decided to start one. I remember one of the early sayings in the transition movement was that the next 20 years are going to be completely unlike the last 20 years. And a few years went by and they shortened that and they said, well, the next 10 years is going to be completely unlike the last 10 years. Trying to get people realizing that we've got to overcome our sort of a normalcy bias, I've heard it called. And now I think, in the way the world is shaping up today, the next 2 or 3 years is going to be completely unlike the last 2 or 3 years. So that really, I think, is what spurs people on. And it's really what gives Transition Bay in our community a very high respect by other nonprofit groups, by just people on the street, business leaders, and so on. They really appreciate the work that we've been doing with all these different topics built around resilience. We've had a number of high points. One of our rock stars is a guy, he's got a beautiful off-grid brand new home. And all you got to do is post posters up and social media that you're doing a workshop on off-grid living and you're going to fill the room. So it's that kind of changes that we're starting to see in people's interest. Upskilling, we call it, is a big one. There's a real hunger, as David mentioned. People want to know how to raise a chicken. They want to know how to grow a tomato. They want to, all of those things, beekeeping, bicycle repair, you name it, just real basic skills for community resilience. And it really becomes important at that community level is what are the skills base for people. So that's a lot of the way we think and a lot of what we do. So thank you, Liv.
Thank you, Bob. Um, so just in case transition towns or the transition movement is 100% new to anyone in the audience, I know you've all touched on pieces of what it is, but in a few sentences, if you had to really shorten it down, how would you describe what the transition movement is? And any of you could go for that one.
Comprehensively building resilience for an uncertain future in a way that that resilience helps us be in a position to build resilience for the next step and the next step. That's all we can do in some ways, but by doing that, we can realize how the possibilities of thinking like an ecosystem.
Well, I think what really attracted us to it is when I first started, there was a group of people that were looking at developing some type of sustainability organization. And we were looking at a really excellent one. They were looking at when I joined in Corvallis, Oregon, using the natural step, which came out of Sweden. And it is good, but it is top down. And our group represented a watershed, over a dozen communities involved in that, lots and lots and lots of different players. Worked for 20 years trying to come up with a collective plan. It just didn't happen. So the idea that a grassroots group could put this together, you didn't have to find any funding. You didn't have to get anybody's approval. You just pulled people together and developed a consensus and a vision of what you wanted to do. But as David said, the important thing was the permacultural approach. That is an ecosystem approach. And it's about all of the pieces within the community and how they support each other. So what the plan that Rob and friends put together and then we put together was all about was just connecting all the dots, get people to talking to each other. But as Bob said, things have changed. And I mentioned that our transition blueprint, we did that in 2019, and the version is coming out now is number 4. But what happened in this last year has it's just really been an eye opener for a lot of us. And what is being, deglobalization is pushing the fact that we need to get our communities um, into a higher level of self-reliance. So if things
Mhm.
fall apart, we'll have our own food, our own energy, our own shelter, but most importantly, we'll have a community that can come together.
Great, thank you. I really like the focus on a holistic approach to the transition movement. Okay, so I'm gonna sort of start with why transition, why now? So, David, I'm curious, compared to other social movements or projects and initiatives, what is unique about transition towns, and why is it particularly useful right now?
Well, it's so practical is one thing. It really is working with building the skills that we need. We call it reskilling, but it's a forum that we can present and help people learn these things. And they're fun and they're deeply rewarding in a way that playing a computer game is actually demoralizes us and guts our psyche. Um, our any over reliance on AI and things of that sort. With um, the living systems have a complexity and intelligence that is shockingly beautiful. And if we learn to recognize it and trust it, instead of thinking that we can engineer our way out of it, we can have a single design of putting together some mechanics and some chemicals together and it's going to work. Well, those are always just temporary things. And usually the side effects are devastating. And we see that if we take a long systems approach. Um, and it's just in hyperdrive right now. So we need this. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely. Thanks, David. Yeah, the biomimicry, sort of replicating what we see in the natural world, is a really important thing to note. Okay, Bill, I'm wondering from your international perspective, I know that you are from the States and you've worked across the States, but also I believe internationally as well. What works in small communities specifically and what hasn't? Are there some lessons you can share with us from your international perspective?
Well, I think what works with small communities, and I've seen this in some of the other programs like Strong Towns. What works in a small community is actually forming a sense of community where people get together and they understand that it's just more than them, it's more than just their immediate family. It's other folks in the community. They get together and they get a vision and they pursue it. But getting back to one of my points and what David just brought up is reskilling. One of the reasons that we use Ralph Rasodi is that he was a pioneer in the back to the land movement, a homesteader, and he was an outstanding one. But he worked for a number of years, bringing people in from the city, from New York City on weekends. And once it got into the Great Depression, when 100 or more communities tried to do this, his assessment was that you needed a institution at the center of the community that could provide the knowledge and skills that it needed. But it is also a community center. So it's a gathering place, it's a library, it's meeting rooms, it's presentations, it's celebrations, you know, but the whole focus, he put that right in the center of the community, both literally and figuratively, because that was the place that people came together, although each family was pretty much providing for most of its own needs. However, collaborating where they couldn't meet those needs.
Thanks, Bill. Bob, I've got a question for you. Why has local economics specifically become such a central focus within the transition movement?
Well, that's a good question. My first thought is we all have to eat. Okay, that's kind of the grassroots where most economies start, is the basic needs for people. You know, it's kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs: water, food, shelter, heat, energy, fuel, all of those sorts of things. Then there's reciprocity of trading skills base. And there's a lot of great movements. There's timeshare, time gifting, those types of things. You could formalize it into an actual network. So no money even needs to change hands, but you're scared, you know, you're changing skills. So I need a welder, I'm an accountant, boom, boom, we swap skills, you know, and that could happen across a whole community just at that level. Then there's local currencies. There's been a whole lot of them. There's still some working quite nicely. All of this live, I think, is my favorite saying is that necessity is the mother of invention. So when times get tough economically, you look back to the Great Depression, people got extremely innovative in all of these ways because the economy is going to go on one way or the other. And a lot of that innovation happens when things get tough. The Antigonish movement that we're very famous for in this part of the world, same thing. That's how it got started. Times were tough. People were ready to wake up and try something new. So at the end of the day, it all comes down to the economy and how good is it. But right now, just about everywhere in North America and probably most of Europe, there's the big box shopping district.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? You can drive down the strip They're all lined up, all the big box stores, all the franchise restaurants, the whole thing. And all that money goes somewhere else. All of that profit, all of that wealth. I say you can drive down there and you can hear the economic sucking noise. And it's all being pulled out of the economy. And it leaves us that much poorer. So, how do you capture it? How do you build the wealth within the community? And as Bill was saying, it starts with community and people getting together and say, hey, we can do something.
Yeah, I love the relational, trust-based approach that you're all bringing. All right, David, I'm curious if you have. So I heard from you folks that the movement built a lot of momentum and then has kind of in some ways dropped off in a lot of places. So I'm curious, David, if you think there's a reason in particular that transition St. Margaret's Bay, I'm sorry if I got that name wrong again, remains strong while many of the other groups in the region have faded.
Sure. And one way I like to remember the name is that the web um, address is transitionbay.ca. It's easy to remember if you think transitionbay.ca. And it's fun. So everyone look up our webpage, which has all sorts of information and videos um, at transitionbay.ca. Uh, so I would say that we need to not overcomplicate the organization and not make it an overreach of what we're trying to do. We don't have to do everything. Um, and in fact, here in St. Margaret's Bay, we have the St. Margaret's Bay Stewardship Association, which is working on conserving pieces of land primarily. Um, and they're doing a wonderful job at that. So we don't need to duplicate that. And uh, we're happy when something like um, a food bank or um, the or any other organization spins off from Transition Bay. We don't need to control that. So just putting out the seeds and letting it gestate. So I think not over organizing is important. Just getting there with a core group and starting putting on programs and having some fun with doing it. And keep your vision and don't look too hard to say, well, did this succeed? Do we have to keep track of how many people now put in solar in their houses? Um, it take or whatever. How many people get chickens when we do it? We just the whole committee approach will work in some places, but it doesn't seem to work so much in St. Margaret's Bay for transition towns or for anywhere in Atlantic Canada. The ones that we've seen to fail, I think that was the major thing. They followed the transition handbook too closely and spent all their time organizing instead of putting on some programs and learning some things themselves. So if you want to learn about something, put on a program. That's what I do. I'm going to put on a program um, later in the spring, I hope, about how to choose between drilling wells and putting in um, uh, new cisterns, water cisterns, and maybe some conservation efforts for water because last year was the driest we've had in perhaps living memory. And I think that's the new normal, very likely. So I've got to do something different. Why not just learn about it for yourself, but do it in a program? It's not so hard. Um, and videotape it and put it out, something like that. And just relax a bit about it.
I love the emphasis on fun. Have fun with it. Yeah, that's really important and sounds like a very action-oriented group,
So,
which
so
you can
Liv, I could jump in there as well.
please do.
We're 15 years old. We've got what we call the steering group, the steering committee. We meet monthly. There's about 8 of us. It's kind of changed complexion over the years, but normally about eight, give or take. And we kind of scope out 6 months ahead. As David was saying, just do a workshop. So somebody will say, hey, how about if I do a workshop on dot, 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 and then things happen. And then we've got kind of layers of the onion. There's maybe another 15, 20 people that will plug in around a workshop, an event, something like that. And then further out, we have a pretty extensive mailing list, and a lot of people just start to show up for stuff. And we've done a lot of really cool things. Food preservation. Okay, well, let's do an all-day workshop. We'll pull in 6, 8 teachers. Somebody will lead off with hot water bath canning, and then we do fermenting, and then jams and jellies, and then dehydration. We just run through the whole thing, and people fill their boots, and they're like, oh my God, I learned so much. So that is how you basically make it fun, and you're building that skills base, which is really important, and that sense of community. So everybody that attends something like that, they all start to know each other, they stay in touch, that sort of thing.
And we can build partnerships. For instance, we're having a Seedy Saturday coming up relatively soon. We built a partnership with the St. Margaret's Bay Gardening Club, which before this, they used to just do ornamentals. And they did a lot of beautiful work, but we made a partnership, and now they're putting more and more focus on edibles as well, and things that enhance the living biosphere where we are, and the Seedy Saturdays. And that is, they have tremendous outreach, and it's so much fun. And Transition Bay did locally the first of the upskilling. And now College Action Center has done upskillings, and the second upskilling for the Center for Local Prosperity will be happening. So these things can take root, and yeah, and that's sharing.
Thanks, David. Okay, I want to ask the three of you if someone, say, in this group was interested in starting a transition town initiative in their community, what would you tell them to do first?
Well, as a transition trainer, um, and you guys have done it, so you're a great example of how this has to be done. It's that Margaret Mead thing that not only can a small group change the world, only a small group can change the world. So it gets back to what Bob was talking about, the core group. Um, the core group, and my wife's pictures on the screen here. She was a part of the core group and has been a very strong support for transition for all the years and all the work that I do. But the members of my core group from 2008, 2009, uh, those that are still alive are still hanging in there, and we do things very informally. The thing about and I think what David was describing about, reskilling and all little workshops, a community as an ecosystem it is a extremely sophisticated thing, but it's self-organizing. So if you try to overplan it, you're going to kill it. You don't need to do that, but the thing with the community is that everybody gets to meet each other downtown, and it's an informal way of connecting. Once we finished our plan, rather than create an organization to impose it, we created a network structure. And we had a little co-working space that was some of my colleagues, close working group, had formed right in the middle of town, which was a great place to meet because what they were focused on was community building. And we would simply get people together just casually, this is what you're doing. I'm working on something. Well, you need to talk to so and so. So it was always this matter of getting people to connect. But Eric, Michelle, and I, the three of us that were sort of the core of this, we're sort of fanatical networkers. So one of the things we did, actually, one of the people that worked at that group put the first list together. And she was mostly trying to connect students at Penn State with the community. And when she moved on, I took over the list. But one of the things we keep is just a directory. If you want to find out what's going on in your community, here it is. There's a whole list of keywords to, you want to find out about food, you want to find out about climate change, et cetera. There's over 100 programs and organizations that are listed. So the idea is just try to keep them connected. But the idea of a community, I think, is essential. You have to have that self-identity. And given the direction you're going, you really have to have a community that, as the original founders of your community did, is create some sense of order and security out of the wilderness itself. So they have to have that vision that their community is going to survive, it's going to thrive, regardless of what happens. Other than that, the people, once they get the vision, once it's in their heart, they'll just do what they have to do.
So Liv,
And we learn.
Bill, thank you. I want to just say one other thing about starting a transition town. I noticed from the list of participants, we got someone from Mahone Bay, someone from Pugwash, probably other parts of the province. I'm not quite sure. Interested in starting a transition initiatives. Transition Bay, David, I think we've done at least 2, maybe 3 transition training weekends. Bill mentioned he's a transition trainer. We did 3. Thank you. And Bill, you're expert at training people on how to start an initiative. So if there's enough interest, I think later this year we could pull one together and have another weekend for training. So do let us know, info@transitionbay.ca, and we'll see what we can put together. There's great weekends, by the way, incredible amount of content, I've got to say.
And learn to think like an ecosystem. So have some trust. You don't have to manage everything and control it all. You can sow the seeds and let them take their course. And that way they'll grow the best way of all.
Mhm.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, I think we're ready to start with some questions. So I know Andy has a few in here, but I would encourage anybody else. I will read Andy's questions, but if anybody else has any questions, please put them in the chat. Or if you'd like to just unmute yourself and ask your question, feel free to do that as well. But in the meantime, I think I kind of covered, Andy, your first question, which was about, yeah, so that one's good. How about
one follow-up, just like the minimum number of folks that would need to come together for you to want to do a training? Like, is it 5? Is it 10? Is it 3? Like, what do you need before you say, yeah, let's go into the community and do a training?
Well, sort of an ideal situation is around 20 people.
20.
It creates enough synergy to really get things going. You can form the breakout groups, but when you bring everybody together, they can all talk to each other. They get to know each other, particularly over the course of a 2-day weekend. Like I said, to get started, it just takes a handful of people, but an ideal training situation, a lot of friends that I've worked with in workshops says about 20 is it. Over 20, it starts to get more complex.
Great. Andy, you also had a question about metrics of success. So there was a question about, and I think this was semi-answered, but about how St. Margaret's Bay is different or better after 15 years or 16 years of being a transition town community. And he was curious about your metrics of success and any changes that you've seen.
I'll throw out a few thoughts on that after 15 years. Everybody's hair is more gray. At least those who were there at the beginning. Um, but that's not a metric of success. I think it's really the respect. David mentioned a couple of the other nonprofits groups in the area, and I've been told that we have one of the higher per capita of nonprofit groups working in like the Stewardship Association, you've got the Seniors Association, on and on it goes. And we've partnered with a lot of them, and there's, I think, a very deep respect of the work that we're doing and the sustainability. The food bank loves us. We've got a volunteer vegetable garden. About 10, 12 people show up all at once. We put the word out, do the weeding, the planting, the harvesting, and we crank out about 2 pounds of vegetables per square foot out of just 4 raised beds and deliver in excess of 500 pounds per year of fresh produce to the food bank. They absolutely love us. So that's an example of just building that respect. It's not a hard numbers metric. We measure occasionally just by how many people attend different events. So I mentioned our rock star on off-grid living. Good thing the fire marshal wasn't around. We dramatically exceeded the room capacity of the biggest room at the local library um, on that event. Um, so those are just some of the ways that we feel like we've been integrated very well into the community.
Our local um, a local realtor told me that before Transition Bay, if she was selling a house and someone had a greenhouse or a garden, she would advise them to get rid of it and you'll get more money for your house. Now, she says in St. Margaret's Bay, you put that right on the listing that you've got a beautiful vegetable garden and you've got a nice greenhouse and your house value is higher now. If you say you've got solar, are all of these other sustainable things going? Tell people. People like that now, and they didn't before.
That is a success. That's a
Yeah.
success.
Yeah, if,
Amazing.
if I could add something to what I told Andy, my response to his question was thinking workshops. But there are a number of ways of getting larger number of groups of people, even up to 100 people, open space and various cafe type situations. So for a training, like I said, I prefer to keep it fairly small because once you get a number of people trained on the techniques, the technology, the whatever that they need, they can train everybody else. So you can spread it. But if you need to get, and I'm sure you're aware of this, if you need to get a lot of people together, there are other ways of getting a good conversation going.
Thanks, Bill. There's a question from Misty. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name properly, but they're curious if the group is connected to or familiar with FarmWorks.
We did a workshop with FarmWorks. Um, and so I would say yes.
And I've been personally very impressed at the staying power of Linda Best. Absolutely incredible. She's not slowing down as far as I can tell. But yeah, the workshop we did, and she does these once in a while. I think she calls it Gentle Dragons, if you remember that, David. Um, and it's basically kind of an entrepreneur's pitch session of people that have food ideas, food business ideas, and they pitch to FarmWorks, and then they can see what their odds are getting some funding from FarmWorks. But it's been an incredible story in our province, and I know they're out raising their, oh Lordy, what is it, 15th round of funding? I can't even remember how many other rounds they've had. But they're still quite a building force in our area.
Yes, I believe their raise ends on March 2nd. So if anyone's interested in that. Got a question from Kellyanne. And it's when you're strategizing on workshops, are you pulling expertise from your steering committee for skill shares, or are you bringing in others, or is it a mix of both?
Mix. But the thing is, if you bring up an idea, um, you're supposed to be the one that's going to spearhead doing it. It's never like, you guys should do that. We get people write us in and say, you guys should do this or that and the other, and we write back to them always. Oh, that's an interesting idea. But would you like to coordinate that? And we'll support you. We can do outreach and things like that, but um, we need people to jump in. And so that is also encouraging and skill building in itself, community building too.
And David, I could add to that. Yes, we do bring in others. So, perfect examples. We got a workshop coming up at the end of March, domestic emergency preparedness. And one of the guest speakers is going to be actually the woman that's going to facilitate the whole thing. She is the communication and training coordinator for Halifax Emergency Management and Community Safety. So we're going to talk about um, major disaster events, whether it's a hurricane, it could be a drought, could be a flood, could be a major power outage, whatever it is. How do you domestically prepare for that? Even to the extent of extended grid down events, food or fuel shortages, that sort of thing. So it's going to go way further than just, get some batteries for your flashlight and some extra water and stuff like that. So that's an example, pulling in somebody. We do that quite frequently um, as we plan all these things.
Yeah, I would like to see that as well. I've been working with a group here, is trying to put together some neighborhood emergency management work. And I do have some background in emergency management, but she sounds like a tremendous resource.
Yeah.
And we've also learned how to do very simple videotaping on the cell phone. I often do that. And it's really rather easy to make a simple recording if you pay attention to a few little things. Um, and people will watch it. But the world is flooded with that too. It's always better if people come, and that's getting harder and harder in today's world. So there's a double-edged sword in that too.
We've got time for one more question, and we've got another one from Andy there. So Andy says, funding is very much on people's minds lately with the recent cuts that have been announced by the province of Nova Scotia. What kind of budget does a transition town group need to function well for a year?
David, let me handle that one. We've got a problem. We can't figure out how to spend enough money.
That's a good problem to have, I think.
Yeah, I'm serious. We're all volunteers, for starters. The library where we have most of our events, normally they charge to rent a room, but they like us so much that we're free there. And a lot of things get donated. And a lot of these workshops, they don't really cost anything. Maybe we'll give an honorarium to a speaker like this woman that's coming to do the emergency stuff, but she's a city employee, so she may not want an honorarium. Sometimes we'll pay mileage for folks that drive in from a distance, but all of that's pretty low key. We do get some donations that come in from individuals. We get some funding from the local, it's called the Bay Treasure Chest. So two of our volunteers go and help them out for 3 hours a month, and we get a stipend from them. So there's other sources of income that come in, but we have a very low cost profile, I think you could say.
Right. So it's very much relationship based, like you guys were saying before, and sort of a trade system also. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, we're almost almost up on our hour, so I'm going to do a bit of a closing. But there is a question from Kelly about where to sign up for attendance, I believe, about the emergency management stuff. So if somebody could maybe answer in the chat to that one, that would be excellent. So I just want to take a moment to thank our panelists, David, Bill, and Bob. Thank you so much for joining today and sharing your experiences and your knowledge and wisdom with us. Much appreciated. And also all of you lovely audience members for taking an hour out of your day to be with us. So we do host these webinars once a month on the last Thursday of the month at 12 p.m. Atlantic. The next webinar will be focused on reskilling. So it's actually a great follow-up episode to this webinar. And additionally, we have a semi-new addition to our roster of events, which is our monthly community of practice meeting, which happens in the week following the webinar. So that's the first Thursday of the month at the same time, so 12 p.m. Atlantic. You can find information on that on our website. And the next one is March 5th. So we hope you will consider joining us for that as well. Yeah, thanks again, everybody. Have a lovely day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. This has been very enjoyable. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Liv. Fantastic.
And I just answered the question, but there won't be time for people to read it really. But when the program is posted at our website, then there will be a sign up. But the way to get the notice right away is to join our email list. And you can do that by going to our webpage at any time and leaving your email list. And so go to transitionbay.ca and add your name. And I promise you, we won't flood you with too much information, and we won't be asking for money. Thank you.
Okay. And Bill, great working with you, and I hope we stay in touch.
I do too.
Yeah, some chance we might get you up this way. Who knows?
Yeah, it'd be great to have you for a training.
All right, well, look at that. Thank you again.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, David.
Thanks so much. It's fun.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.